Hi everyone, I'm Marcy. I'm an American law professor. I spent the last few years addressing the role of law, looking at three buckets of workplace needs stemming from the menstrual cycle and related conditions. The first bucket is how the law can increase access to meaningful menstrual and menopausal accommodations, so the modifications and availability of spaces and things so that they can be used with dignity and without surveillance, such as uniform modifications, fans, temperature control, wellness rooms, menstrual-friendly toilets with running water, bins, and products, and the scheduling flexibility or time away from work to address biology, so things like job-protected break time, to obtain products or toilets, or time off to rest until pain subsides, or to see a doctor, to consider HRT, or explore what to do about fibroids or endo or other conditions. The second bucket is how to use the law to create or enhance protections against discrimination, harassment, and bullying on the basis of the menstrual cycle. And the third bucket relates to using law to increase knowledge, education, and training about biology, given the abysmal state of menstrual education around the world, how workplace structures can impact the menstrual cycle, and how to enforce the protections you might get related to the first two buckets of needs. In this work, which I'm really just starting, I'm digging deeper into the impact of menstrual bargaining in this space. Essentially, how do the formal and informal collective actions by workers secure meaningful access to the accommodations, anti-discrimination protection, and education and enforcement that I've already demonstrated in prior work is needed? To date, I've reviewed approximately 24 union-based campaigns and about the same number of individual grievances and cases from America, Australia, Canada, Ireland, Japan, and the UK. And here's my major takeaway from the study of those campaigns and grievances so far. Guess what? Both trade unions and informal collective action play an important role in improving workplace conditions related to menstrual and menopausal related needs. And there's more that collective worker action can do moving forward to support all workers. I know that's not a shock to those of you that are UK-based, right? And it's odd to talk to a UK-based audience about the role of labor in this space. You get the point of labor advocacy and how to support. You know, when I lived in Scotland last year, pretty much everyone was striking, including some of you in this room. You recognize the power of a formal strike and informal support. You have contracts to address precarity of positions, right? You know how to enforce your rights through grievances, and your unions organize when aren't rights or when those rights aren't properly enforced. But if you've never spent time in the rest of the world, unions are declining, and we forget that they're politically savvy. They know how to deploy the media, engage in and share evidence-based research, and see the value of bargaining beyond statutory protections or when statutes afford no protections. So, you know, this seems to be an unusual place that isn't the standard around the world, especially in America, where unions have dwindled over the decades, and it could be the rare area that helps American unions, for example, demonstrate their utility moving forward. So with that, quickly, what types of menstrual bargaining have taken place? The global case studies demonstrate that unions have played four major roles with respect to removing workplace barriers and supporting current and former menstruators. First, they've bargained for contractual rights, especially related to accommodations. The second role unions have played is enforcing the contractual right to bargain for protections for both individuals and for classes of workers. So, for example, a union filed a grievance on the day a poultry plant issued a rule that prevented emergency bathroom access, arguing the new rule was manifestly unfair, undignified, and didn't account for biological variances, especially when it was being used by primarily white male management against a mostly Black women production line workers. That also led to a factory manager telling a worker to train herself to go to the bathroom outside of work. I know it's possible because I have a dog who was able to stay at home for 7 or 8 hours a day and wouldn't relieve himself until he got home and let the dog out. So stories like that, actually the union was able to collectively change the policy. I read decisions involving individual grievances, many of which contested sort of adverse employment actions that were related to excessive absences, and often had comparisons with male workers who violated the very same attendance standards and did so for non-menstruation related needs, and they weren't punished equally. So there's some misogyny that is seen in reading these cases. Collective action also isn't always successful, right? I can tell you cases of Australian manufacturing workers campaign that was very high profile that tried to get menstrual leave in Toyota plants, but didn't happen, or just because there is a collectively bargained for agreement doesn't mean that the worker wins, right? So there's lots of cases where workers have been denied relief through the grievance process, even if there is a relevant provision. The third role, in the interest of time, is when, or the third role for menstrual bargaining is when labor advocates for culture shift, even if they don't negotiate a provision in the collective bargaining agreement. There's a lot of space, a lot of activity in this space right now, with unions creating model policies and tips to negotiate with employers for provisions. Unions have led destigmatization campaigns, employer education campaigns, and changed the conversations in some workplaces. For example, since we're in the UK, the Trades Union Congress, right, has created a number of cultural change initiatives, from prompting menopause awareness to advocating for gender-sensitive risk assessments to creating a workplace point of contact for where you should go for work. A collection of Irish trade unions created a high-profile #StopTheStigma campaign, and Forces, which is Ireland's second largest union, has advocated for all workplaces to have menstruation-related policies, and asked employers to take steps to stop treating health conditions as a joke at work. And finally, unions have advocated for broader reforms for all workers, not just those that are part of their membership. So, for example, with respect to product-based accommodations, unions were very active in Scotland's Period Products Act, but have also asked every employer in Scotland to provide free products and for them to be in all public toilets. Canadian unions played a really large role in shaping its new regulations that require employers to provide menstrual products at no cost at all federally regulated workplaces. And when you move beyond products, you see unions being really active in Wales' period dignity strategy plan. In England, right, unions have been active in consultations regarding menopause and providing best practice policies, and in attempting to make flexible work the standard. In Australia, the Council of Trade Unions did actually successfully obtain menstrual leave, or 5 days of paid reproductive leave that can be used for menstruation, menopause, or IVF treatments. And there are other early leave laws that started as union policies. So in Japan, for example, it goes back to 1917 action, right? And that's where some of the menstrual leave came. And there's decades of examples in Japan of union activity, including formal policies that were collectively bargained for in 1931. So out of time, so more to be analyzed, but menstruation and related conditions are an area that is increasingly subject to bargaining for good and bad. Collective action is a way to get normative change, and there is a lot that countries and unions can learn from each other, and that non-unionized workforces can sometimes benefit from this collective action regardless of union activity. Thanks.
It's great to hear like the really good work the unions are doing kind of globally as well. I just wonder, in terms of the States, how big is kind of union coverage and union membership?
It's big is not the right word. It's 1% in 2022, more so in public sector, like in the UK.
Yeah.
Public sector unions matter a bit more active in some industries than others, but there for the first time is some real power positions that are being held by people who have currently or have menstruated. So like there's women in some union leadership now for the first time. And because of weird politics in the state, it's actually an opportunity, right, for there to be some change if we can articulate the lessons that you all have learned over here.
Yeah, sorry, you go on, Laura, you're going to say something. It doesn't come through.